97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Andrew DiCecco is here. We need answers because Doug Peterson didn't give us any as he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline to look back at what happened and what's next for this 3-8-1 Eagles team. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Mike, I'm doing well outside of, another drama-filled week surrounding this football team. But, it's great to be with you and Hunter on this Monday afternoon and talk some birds.
Well, let's get into it now. And first, let's ask you and get your opinion on what decision do you think Doug Peterson will make moving forward here? Will he go with Jalen Hurts on Sunday, or will he go back to Carson Wentz?
Well, Mike, this is something I thought a lot about over the past, however many hours since the game ended. And it's one of those things where I think Doug knows he observed the spark that Jalen Hurts gave the Eagles late in the game against Green Bay. And I think if you're Doug Peterson, you can't keep trotting out Carson Wentz week after week and expecting the same result. It's just not working out. He did sit down for a half, but I think that he's going to have to sit down for another game and really get clear eyes, clear perspective, and I think they're going to give the ball to Jalen Hurts next week. And I think that's ultimately what they should do, just to see what you can get going on offense and really get your quarterback to allow him to recalibrate and gather himself, and hopefully he can come back the following week and resume that starting role.
Now, I mean, at this point, and this is my breakdown of this, and see how you feel about this. I feel that he has been told, Doug, hey, do you think it would help for Carson to sit and watch for a little bit, which is what happened. That's why I think he's going to go back to Wentz this week. And then if Wentz struggles here, he replaces him with Hurts, and then Hurts keeps the job. But him sitting and watching, I don't know if that will end up helping him or not, but that's the way that I kind of see it. That's why I think Wentz will be back out there.
Yeah, and I think that you and I spoke about this last week, and my initial thought was, I said, look, I think that if Wentz continues to struggle like he has been, that they're going to sit him down in Green Bay, even if it's for a series or for a half, and that's certainly what happened. And I said, what's going to be more telling, more revealing this week is how he approaches this week. Is it going to light a fire under him? Is he going to learn from that? Is he going to have a different perspective and take that as a learning opportunity and be the quarterback that he has been, and kind of really start from the ground up and figure out what's going wrong, what's not working, and hopefully that carries into a productive week in practice and he's able to take the field on Sunday. It's just based on some of the answers that you hear today and what you saw, like the energy that Jalen Hurts infused into the entire offense. And I think that has to be taken into account as well. And I think it's going to be a decision. I don't think it's clear cut, and you can make a case for both players being the starter on Sunday for different reasons.
I think it's important to start Hurts just so you can see what you have. And I know 4 games is a small sample size, but I just want to throw this out there at you. If this is what Wentz is, and he struggles to this degree, obviously you can't continue, even though the contract situation is what it is. Maybe he's your backup quarterback or whatever, but you can't have him out there on the field. If Hurts is not your long-term option, knowing you have pick number 6, which might be the closest you are ever at the top again, is it out of the question that maybe one of the reasons why you got to see Hurts is you need to know if you're possibly looking at a quarterback in the draft?
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you there, Hunter. And to be clear on Carson Wentz, do I think that he's ever going to revert back to the 2017 Carson? No. Do I think he's as bad of a player as he's playing this year with these type of deficiencies? No. I think he's ultimately somewhere between those two extremes, and I think you're going to see what he is mostly the 2019 Carson Wentz. Is that good enough to be a franchise starter, someone who's making $128 million, who got that contract? I don't think it is. And, I mean, you do need to see what you have in Jalen Hurts. You can't go into the offseason with 2 question marks at the most crucial position on a football team. You have to at least have some sort of an idea of what he can bring, what his ceiling is, what he needs to work on in the offseason. Because, like you said, they're going to have a premium spot in the draft. And there's a lot of it's quarterback heavy at the top of that draft. And that deserves some consideration if you're a little bit little timid on both of your options there. So I think there's something to be said for that. And yes, 4 games is a small sample size, but they'll have enough to go off of if there's something to work with there, or if he's more of a project than what they initially anticipated.
Well, let me ask you this. What if Hurts plays well? I mean, can the organization truly say we're going to have a $158 million backup?
I mean, it's kind of – I was thinking about this, Mike, and dragging Carson through all this, the awkwardness, just maybe like you have to take into account how Carson feels. I mean, can you go back? Like if Jalen Hurts plays well and he strings together some good games and the back and forth in the media and Doug's answers and these cryptic answers, and you could tell that Carson's not too pleased, and that's what you expect from a competitor. But can you really, if you're Carson Wentz, can it ever return to normal? Can you go back into that locker room? Will you be perceived the same? Can you be that guy, or do you really need a fresh start to kind of just, turn the page, get a clean slate somewhere else?
When it comes to him possibly being your backup quarterback with that type of money, if Hurts is the answer and he's the one moving forward, I know it's not pleasing to the eye, but you're spending the same amount of money regardless, whether Carson Wentz is playing or Jalen Hurts is the backup, or Jalen Hurts is playing and Carson Wentz is the backup. So my question is, does it really matter? If you're spending the same amount of money anyway in that position, it's about the best product on the field, no?
Yeah, you're right. It's about the best product on the field. The only way that would really matter is if you have to figure out what kind of pieces you're going to build around certain players. They both have different skill sets. And if the pieces are in place and if you decide to go forward with Jalen Hurts, then I think that if you have a chance to win, you got to put the best guy out there. And you have to figure out ultimately who you're going to build around. And that's going to be really telling because you have to really see what you have here in Jalen Hurts over these next 4 games.
I mean, you're in a situation, though, where – again, I find like if Doug Peterson and the organization, do you feel that whoever the starting quarterback is some insight on who's pulling the strings here? Like if Wentz starts, does that mean, hey, Peterson made this decision? But if Hurts starts, does that tell you that someone else had a hand in this decision? Because again, I go back to this contract, and they cannot get rid of this guy. They cannot get rid of Carson Wentz, and I don't see any team in football, do you, Andrew, that will bench a $160 million player?
Yeah, that's a franchise crippling contract if the player doesn't work out, certainly. But I mean, yeah, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, Jalen Hurts, you really have to see what you have there in Jalen Hurts, and I think that it's going to be really tough. I don't know that there's going to be any team that's willing to take that kind of a contract from Carson, but I don't know. I mean, if Jalen Hurts shows you enough over these next 4 games, if you're Doug Peterson, I think you have to go that route.
Right.
And if you're Doug Peterson, and you could also look at this in 2 different ways, Mike. You said that this could be telling about who's pulling the strings. Well, you could also look at it as if Doug Peterson's trying to play for his job, and Jalen Hurts might give him the best chance to keep that job if he plays well. Or he could say, look, I have a guy I'm developing here. Maybe it would afford him another season.
Okay, well, that's another question, is how much of where they currently sit in the division standings play a factor here? In other words, how do I go to Brandon Graham and, I mean, there's the veteran Jason Kelsey? How do I tell those guys, hey, I'm turning things over? Now, they might be on board with it, but, I mean, people say, well, why are you playing this guy and why are you playing that guy? Well, we're still in this division race. Whether we want to hear that or not, they're in this thing still. How much does that play a factor in this decision?
Well, they are hanging by a thread. Technically, yes, they are still in the division race. But if they keep the same formula with Carson Wentz out there, they're not winning football games. That's known. Nothing's really changed since that. So I think that if you're a veteran like a Brandon Graham, like a Jalen Mills, like a Fletcher Cox, you're probably going to be on board with any sort of an option. Hey, you know what? Yeah, let's give this a shot. Because when you have a player like Jalen Hurts, yes, it was a brief sample size, but a lot of his play and energy, that's going to resonate with a lot of guys in that locker room. And unfortunately, this is just a disaster of a situation because it's going to potentially cause some divisiveness in the locker room. You're going to have some guys that are all, get Wentz back out there. He's your franchise quarterback, and you're going to have other guys that are like, hey, you know what? Let's do it with what the kids got. Let's see what the upside is here. So I think that you could either go back to what's known, and like you said, Carson Wentz had 79 yards at the half. He wasn't moving the football, and he was getting sacked and indecisive and not seeing the field well. Or you could go with an unknown commodity there and maybe have something.
So let's get to the on-the-field product that you got out of Jalen Hurts. He finished 5 of 12. He had the interception, had some missed throws, but that play to Jalen Reagor, awesome throw, awesome catch, may I add, and the play to Greg Ward. And you saw him use his legs as well. A little bit of me does question, though, hey, look, it was the fourth quarter, and it was a 20-point game. How much does that factor in? So everything you saw out of Hurts, what were your thoughts?
Well, and that's fair because the Packers are going to be in a prevent defense. By all accounts, they had it all packed in. They were pretty much ready to, end the game, and we weren't really seeing any of their exotic looks per se. But what I will say is this: the Eagles to yesterday hadn't had in 4 weeks a receiver that had 20 yards, a 20-yard completion or more, 20-yard reception or more, and Jalen Hurts threw a 34-yarder to Jalen Reagor and a 32-yard dime to Greg Ward. There's something to be said for that. I mean, the pass to Reagor was pinpoint accurate, and the one to Greg Ward was a fantastic throw and catch. I mean, yes, what I like to see, I thought he looked off his reads a little quick sometimes and was too quick to kind of get out of the pocket and scramble. And I thought some of his throws towards the sideline could, use a little bit more velocity. But, I mean, there were some big-time throws that I thought that he made, and I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like he moved the football. He had 100 yards passing. He threw a touchdown. He moved the offense. He was an engine in the second half, and his energy radiated throughout the entire offense.
Well, let me ask you about what you thought about him coming into the NFL. I mean, were you high on him as a quarterback coming out of college?
Yes, Mike, but I thought that he was a player that was not NFL ready, and he needed a little bit of time to develop. I still don't think he's 100% ready. I think that the Saints, if he does start that game, they're going to throw a lot at him that he hasn't seen, and they're going to have to simplify the game plan and play to his strengths. We're talking about a guy who's only played 59 snaps in the NFL and only thrown 15 passes. But, yes, he was a player that I liked, and I thought he had good upside. In fact, I wrote an article before the draft that I thought he would be he was like a dark horse to be a late first-round pick. And there's a lot of teams that were intrigued by him. But he's not. He didn't strike me as somebody that was ready to start day one. I thought he'd be a year two. He would be a factor in year two.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. What are the options with Wentz? And by the way, the cap hit is ridiculous. I mean, it's like $60 million. But I don't know if there's differences if you trade him. There's been some talk about, all right, what about trying to trade him? But what are their options with him?
Well, it's really tough. I mean, their hope is, hey, let's hope he shakes off this funk. He can't be repaired in season, Mike. It's going to have to be an off-season project where they're going to have to revamp everything that he's learned or some of his tendencies and build him from the ground up, hopefully with a new quarterbacks coach. Look, I don't think for 1 second that you lose your ability in 12 games. There has to be something there that you have to kind of tap into, and the hope is that, we're going to put him together in the offseason, and he's going to be the Carson Wentz of old. I mean, there's, like you said, that kind of contract, your options are extremely limited. There's not going to be anyone willing to take that. The Eagles certainly aren't going to want to eat that. That's their greatest hope is that he kind of puts it together, but they're going to surround him with, different voices because the ones that are there right now, it's just not resonating.
Well, there's another problem. I mean, how many different voices can this guy handle? I mean, how many different voices has he already had? You have Frank Reich, Press Taylor, Mike Groh, Rich Scangarella, not to mention Doug Peterson, Marty Morningweg. I mean, how many more voices can this guy take?
Yeah, well, I think he needs a coach similar to John DiFilippo, one coach that's going to oversee him as a quarterback's coach, harp on his tendencies and really get the best out of him, because that's what you saw. He needs tough coaching, and that's what he responds to. Not this easygoing kind of do whatever you want. Presto or him, they're buddies, and that's obviously not working. That's not a winning formula. So what I think that they need is a fiery coach that's really going to harp on him and hearken some of the things that he does well, but also some of the things that he needs to improve on.
Speaking of all these coaches, did you see anything different from a play calling standpoint for you to believe that somebody else besides Doug Peterson was actually calling those in?
I mean, I thought that first series, I thought that they did some nice. I thought they did some nice thing. I liked the up tempo later. I mean, you could argue that Rich Scangarello was calling the 2-minute plays. I mean, but it was more or less the same, Hunter. I mean, they still didn't run the football enough. They didn't scheme their receivers open. I mean, it was just more of the same lackluster, stagnant offense. And outside, if Wentz were to have played that whole game, you would see largely the same result that you've seen all season. I think it was just more so of the athleticism and pocket presence of Jalen Hurts and his ability to make some of those different types of throws that made the difference. But it really wasn't all that. The offense really wasn't all that different.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that first drive of the game, and I said that first drive was reminiscent of what they did last year. It was a long, plodding. It wasn't exciting, but they just went down. I don't know how many plays it was.
7. It was 7 carries, 7 passes, so it was 14 plays.
Yeah. So a 14, and I tweeted this out, that was your recipe last year, late in the season. They weren't pretty, but you had these long, just plodding drives, and they completely got away from that. So I'm not sure. Again, I don't think we'll ever know who's calling what plays and when. But the question that I have for you is, how much do you think the play calling is affected by the offensive line, the lack of the weapons, or Wentz's inconsistencies? Which factor plays the biggest role in what the play calling looks like? Because, Doug has been the play caller, as he said, since he's got here. They averaged almost 30 points a game a couple of years ago. That has progressively gone down. But what has happened each year? You've had some injuries each year. It seems that when this offense has the right components, they can be a productive offense and be a high-scoring offense. But once you lose a guy or two, that it slowly starts to take a little bit of a hit. So what factors most into the play calling? The inconsistency of the quarterback, the offensive line problems, the inabilities for the receivers to consistently get space?
Yeah, I think it's a culmination of all three. I think it's the quarterback regression, the poor offensive line play, the inability to separate downfield. I mean, the Eagles have already simplified the game plan for Carson Wentz, and we could use the offensive line as an excuse all we want, but there's guys like Deshaun Watson in Houston and Russell Wilson, who's always had bad offensive line play, and up until getting DK Metcalf, their receivers weren't necessarily world beaters. They were Doug Baldwin, who was a more nuanced route runner. He wasn't a burner and things like that. I mean, these guys, you have good quarterbacks, certainly one that's making, that's making the kind of money that Carson Wentz is. They need to elevate guys around them, and they need to make plays. When you're simplifying an offense for a fifth-year quarterback who is with the investment that you've made in him, that's unacceptable. And I mean, I think that the simplification of the play calling has largely to do with it's a lot of things. It's not just the quarterback. It's certainly not just the quarterback. But I mean, eventually that can't be an excuse anymore, and you have to find ways to manufacture offense, especially with what you're paying your quarterback to be. You're paying him to be an elite player. He needs to be an elite player.
So at this stage of the game, you got 4 games left. Obviously, you've got a huge decision on your plate here. Do you think that we possibly have seen the end of Carson Wentz in Philadelphia?
I don't think so. No, I don't. And I mean, I do think that there's something to work with there in Carson. I'm not ready to give up on Carson yet. I think that there's still a lot of ability there, and I think there's just it almost just seems like just a toxic environment around the team this year for so many reasons. And I really do think that they need to get rid of a lot of the coaching staff, get some, new voices in there, work on Carson. Hopefully you have a normal offseason where you can kind of essentially build him from the ground, get rid of some of those tendencies that you saw from this year that kept flaring up, and hopefully he becomes the guy. I think that next season, I think he's the starter in 2021.
I do want to get your thoughts on the whole Miles Sanders usage, because you brought it up when I brought up the play calling side of things. You're basically not even using the guy, and it bothers me because you had 6 carries last game. In this game, you had 5 carries on the first drive and then 5 for the rest of the game. So what are they doing? Is there a bigger issue with his fumbling than we all imagine? I mean, I know that's definitely a knock on him. Are they afraid to use him because of that? I don't understand their logic with their best skill player.
Yeah, that was certainly puzzling. They split the usage between him and Jordan Howard. Miles Sanders has run well this entire season, outside of a handful of drops and that fumble in the Browns game. But he's running well. The numbers speak for themselves, and he's being criminally underutilized. I mean, they're talking about a guy that I thought had a chance to have a 1,300-yard overall all-purpose yard season. I think many of us did going into the year, but they're just not using him enough. It's almost like they get going early and they think, okay, that's enough running, and we're gonna turn to the passing attack. And it also happens when they fall behind. Certainly, falling behind doesn't help with the game script. But I mean, even when Jalen Hurts went in there, Hunter, they weren't running the football. You figure when you get a rookie quarterback in there with limited NFL experience, you're certainly going to run the football and alleviate some of the pressure from take it off his plate. But that just didn't happen. And if they start Jalen Hurts and don't run the football next week, they are doing him an immense disservice. And I mean, if it doesn't happen next week, I really don't know when it's going to happen.
Well, it didn't sound, by the way, that Doug had this glowing observation of what he saw today. He was asked, what did you see in the film of Jalen Hurts? How did he play? Doug Peterson's answer was simple. He played okay, and that was it. Nothing more, nothing less. It didn't seem like he wanted to go gushing about him either. So maybe he feels like, listen, don't get too crazy about what you saw yesterday, because if he gets a full week of game planning it could be a long day at the office for him. Because quite frankly, completing 41% is not very good either. I mean, I got to be fair. If Carson Wentz completes 41% of his passes, I'm blasting him. And Hurts 41%, that's not good. That's not good.
Right, and it's a totally different ball game when teams know who you're starting and they have a whole week to prepare. You're preparing as a starting quarterback. I mean, they're going to figure out your tendencies, and the Saints have one of the more underrated defenses in football. You're going to have Malcolm Jenkins going against the Eagles for the first time since leaving, and there's going to be all these different factors in there. And I mean, if they don't. I mean, like you said, Jalen Hurts was not a world beater yesterday, but what I did like is the energy that he brought to the team, and he it was just a fresh perspective on the offense. But he does have a lot of things to work on, and hopefully this week, if they give him those opportunities to work on that instead of just throwing him in the deep end.
All right, he's Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL. He, like all guests, appeared to be the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. It is Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Make your first deposit and get up to $250. Andrew's back tomorrow. I do think tomorrow we will talk more about Jim Schwartz and that defense, because some people are saying, well, how come you didn't put more blame on them? That'll be tomorrow. Today, it is obviously this huge quarterback situation, and we will talk more about that defense with Andrew tomorrow. Thanks, pal.
Sure thing. Take care.
All right, Andrew DiCecco here on Football at 4.